Hello everyone and welcome to a really wild game from yesterday's Lichess titled Arena. I didn't get a chance to catch any of the games as I had a tournament of my own. We had a Blitz tournament in my chess club. I'm very happy to announce that I was able to win first place, even though I was third seed at the tournament. And there you have it. There's my shiny trophy. Here you can see. Most of you don't speak Croatian, but you know, just in case. There you have it. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of the way, we usually don't show bullet games, but it's when it's played at this level between Alireza and Magnus, their bullet game is of higher quality than most of our classical games. And it's Sunday. The positions that arise are really interesting, so we're gonna take a look at them. This is the last game from the Lichess titled Arena between the two of them, so it's the last game both of them played, I believe. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Let's check it out. Alireza with the white pieces opens with e4. We have c5. Magnus, of course, goes for his Sicilian defense. We have knight f3. Sorry about that. We have knight to c6, and now knight to c3. Still postponing to push d4, but it's not a problem. You could always do this, maybe even to confuse your opponent a little bit. We have e6 and only now d4. We have c captures, knight captures, and a6, so the Taimanov variation is on the board. We have bishop to e3 and knight to f6 now. We have a3 by Alireza and queen to c7. So this is all standard stuff. f4 by Alireza, and now there are a few moves that are often played in this position. d5 is a known move in this position. Knight captures on d4 is a known move. Most played move is d6 and considered strongest by far. But here Magnus goes for b5, and it is a new move in the position. So already as of move 8, we have a completely new game. And this line, instead of going for d6 or d5 or just captures, allows Alireza this e5 move, which of course he goes for. So Magnus trades on d4, knight captures on d4, bishop captures, and now you could go for knight to d5 and allow the doubling of the pawns, but Magnus prefers knight to g8. He wants to remaneuver the knight to f5 via the h6 square. And also bishop to b7 is coming, so Alireza prepares to counter that with bishop to e2, bishop to b7, and now bishop to f3. Countering that bishop, we have knight to h6 going for that f5 square. You will harass the bishop on d4 from there, and now knight to e4. An excellent square for the knight. Magnus definitely doesn't want to give up the light square bishop to get rid of this knight. And at some point, if maybe this bishop moves, maybe ideas like knight to d6 will come to mind. But okay, knight to f5 by Magnus, going after the bishop now. Bishop back to f2, and now maybe not immediately, but at some point maybe some g4 idea, dislodging the knight from the defense of d6 followed by knight to d6 could be played. So Magnus prevents it with h5. And okay, queen e2, continuing development, preparing to castle either king side or queen side, depending on what Magnus plays. And now rook to c8, threatening to pick up the pawn here. So c3, Alireza defends it, and now finally d5. And here, of course, you either move the knight, which is something you don't want to do. You want to capture on d6. As if you allow this d5 pawn to stay here, then it's well, it's doubtful what your light square bishop will be even doing. So Alireza captures en passant. We have e captures on d6 en passant. Knight captures on d6. We have castles now, and Magnus just trades everything. Knight captures, bishop captures, and queen captures on e4. And the bishop to d6 goes after the f4 pawn. And his king is still in the center of the board, so ideas like f5 do come to mind with ideas of just busting open the position here, but then you allow bishop captures on h2 with check, and for a bullet game, not something you want to go into. So first, bishop to d4. Just developing. Now the rook and the queen defend the f4 pawn, and you already go for the g7 pawn. Magnus castles, and now comes rook 8 to e1, and Alireza's forces are now fully operational. So rook f to e8 by Magnus, and king to h1. At some point, this diagonal might come under Carlsen's control, so you don't want your king here. King h1, always a useful move, and bishop to c5. Magnus wants to trade all of the light pieces. Bishop captures, queen captures, and now queen back to f3, with ideas of maybe pushing f5 at some point. So g6, Magnus doesn't allow it, and now rook to e5. A nice rook lift with queen to c4, and now comes rook f to e1. Probably Alireza was considering something like maybe queen g3 with ideas of rook captures here. So Magnus puts pressure on the rook here. So rook fe1, Alireza doubles on the e file, and now rook c to d8. The other rook should have gone to the d file here. Magnus allowed Alireza this f5 move. Alireza didn't play it because it's not all that clear what you gain. Point is, you cannot capture because you lose the rook, and if you capture with the g pawn, then queen captures on h5. But still, white doesn't have much here, but it is something. But instead, Alireza prepared with queen to g3. Now there are ideas of either rook captures here or just f5 now will be strong. So first, rook to d3, putting pressure on Alireza's queen. Queen to g5 now. Still with ideas of f5, because you will not be able to capture with either pawn. And now rook e to d8. Magnus just doubles up on the d file, prepares rook to d1. He wants to trade a pair of rooks and, reduce the pressure in the position. So when one of the rooks is exchanged, then he's just gonna have a better position. So h3, Alireza makes some breathing room for the king. We have rook to d1 and now king h2. Still not interested in capturing and allowing the other rook to come to the first rank. We have queen to d3. Now keeping an eye on the f5 square. But now Alireza sets a very nice trap for Magnus. He plays rook 1 to e3, and now it's a really interesting position. What do you play here? What don't you play here? It's hard to say. Because it's too complicated for such a short time format. But we will get back to this position. The point is, Magnus played queen to d2. You had to play something like queen b1 or queen to d7 to either keep an eye on the g6 pawn or to keep an eye on the g7 square. But we're going to return to that just because it's super interesting. So here, Magnus played queen to d2, but it doesn't work. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning move for Alireza while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on taking advantage of the only mistake Magnus made in the game. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's of course rook captures on e6. That's the point. This is what Alireza played, and now you have to capture the rook. It's not there's not much you can do. For example, if queen d5, you offer a queen trade, rook captures on g6 is coming. And now you're already down 2 pawns, so you might as well capture the rook. And now queen captures on g6, and you're just getting mated. King to f8, you're gonna get queen h6 check, king f7, queen h7 check, king f6, queen e7 check now, forcing the king down the board, king g6, and now rook to e6 with check, either winning the queen, which will be sufficient for a victory, or king f5, and then just queen to f6 is checkmate. So after rook captures on e6, of course Magnus captured the rook, but now it's queen captures on g6, king to f8, and now comes queen to f6 check. And again, if you go to e8, it's not much better. Rook captures here, and you are getting mated here. King d7, rook e7 check, king has to go back, queen captures on a6 check, king here, and queen delivers mate. So Magnus went not to e8, but rather to g8, but here Alireza just played rook to g3 check, and it was in this position that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game. And well, we are going to discuss the standings a little bit because it's also very interesting. If king to h7, then just queen to g7 is mate, and there are no other moves. King h7 is the only move for Magnus, so of course he resigned here. But now I just want to return to that position because, like I said, it's extremely interesting after Alireza played this rook 1e3 move and Magnus played queen to d2. Had Magnus played queen to b1, then it holds, but it's remarkable how it holds. Problem is, you still face rook captures on e6, f captures on e6, and now rook captures on e6 with the idea of capturing here, as the queen was guarding the g6 square. But now you get rook to h1 with check, king g3, and now rook to d7. That's the point. But finding this would be crazy even in a classical game from that position to see this rook d7, the only move that works for black. Because now the point is, if you go rook captures here, you just capture it with the queen. Queen captures and the rook g7 picks up the queen. So captures, and black is just up a rook. So the only thing you could do after rook to d7, this beautiful defensive idea, is actually king to h4, not allowing after this trade happens for black to pick up your queen. But now black has rook g7. Now the g6 pawn is defended twice, and black is up a whole rook. But white has a perpetual. Rook e8 check, king h7. You get queen to d8, threatening mate, and now rook to f7. So these are very unique moves, and it's really crazy that such a position would happen in a bullet game. Rook h8 check, king g7, queen to g8 check, king f6, and now we have a perpetual after queen to d8 check. Because if you go down the board, you're getting mated, so you have to go back, and now it's just a nice perpetual. So really, really impressive stuff, and really in this position, finding this, well, even in a classical game, not happening. Well, you would definitely play it and then maybe find it after. You would not play this in a classical game, of course, and allow this, but it's really, really impressive stuff. So yeah, like I said, I do hope you enjoyed it, and these are the standings after the Lichess titled arena. Sorry, I just have to make it a little bit smaller. As you can see, Alireza won first place, Magnus won second place, and Penguin won third place. But it was extremely close. You see, first Magnus was on a streak, and then Magnus lost the last 5 games. And Alireza, on the other hand, won the last 5 games. And out of those 5, I think 2 of them were against Magnus, and he beat Magnus in both of them. So if you take those, for those 20 points, that's basically it. It was really intense up until the last minute, and Alireza was able to really put it in a better gear in the end of the tournament and win the tournament with a very nice point lead ahead of everyone, including Magnus. So yeah, there we have it for the titled arena March of 2020 on Lichess. First place Alireza, second Dr. Nichterstein, that's Magnus Carlsen, third Penguin GM and Andrew Tang, then Figlud, and don't know who that is, then Federikov 93, Wizard 98, Sergei Zhigalko in 7th, House Martel in 8th, FIDE Master, then Grandmaster Nihal Sarin in 9th, and International Master Menir Mendje in 10th place. So I imagine it was a great tournament, but yeah, I couldn't catch any of the games, so that's why I decided to show you one, and I will put a link to the tournament in the description below if you want to check out some of the games maybe. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Barry McMurdoch, Johan Achlef, Steve Hansen, Bill Parkinson, and Joel Sichel for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the Paul Morphy saga, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, and of course, whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday.